to the cloud. Recording in progress. Hello, like I said, welcome to Sasko River Center's Parent Discussion Series. The theme this year is stress and its effects on us and our children. Today's presentation is Managing Anxiety with Applied Behavior Analysis. Our presenter is Kristen Bodenheimer, who works at Sasko River as a behavioral analyst. Did I get that right? Yes, good. She's going to discuss how we can manage our anxiety through behavior, which I'm very excited to hear, so I can manage my own anxiety. I'm a little anxious right now. No, I'm kidding. I love presentations. A few housekeeping items before we get started. First of all, like I said, this will be recorded. A PDF of the presentation materials and a link to the recording will be made available to all the registrants, will be emailed to all the registrants later today, about 1 or 2 o'clock. Second housekeeping items, if possible, for the presenter's benefit, please leave your video cameras on so that we can get some feedback as to how it's being received and taken. It's not always possible. You might be someplace that's not, appropriate, but if you can, please do. Last housekeeping item is regarding questions. And I've spoken to Kristen beforehand about this, and it's okay to ask the questions during the presentation, but if you could put them in the chat, that would be preferable. If you're not able to chat and you need to pipe up, that's okay. There's a lot of information to go over, and I think we're going to get hit pretty hard with a lot of information. So if you have questions on a term or a definition or something that clarifies, you're probably not alone in wanting to know a bit more. So please feel free to go ahead and ask, again, either in the chat or pipe up as a second choice. So with that, I'm going to be sharing the slides in a moment when it's appropriate, but I'm going to now present and hand the reins over to Kristen Bodenheimer, our behavioral specialist analyst. All right.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I just wanted to thank everyone for being here. There is quite a few of you here, which is good for me that I have all of these skills now, so I can use it a little bit for myself. I'm very excited to talk about this topic. As Mark said, there's a lot of information. I tried very hard to keep it user-friendly, but there's some terms, key terms that I brought in that I just thought would be helpful. But also, as Mark said, it'll probably take around 30 to 45 minutes. So we'll definitely have a lot of time at the end to go over some things, but feel free, especially if there's a term that just doesn't really click or make sense. I'm happy to go over it more with some examples, but thank you. And I'm really excited. We're going to talk about stress and anxiety and some strategies that we can try to use to help manage them a little bit better. So of course, I had a little technical difficulty and I couldn't share my slides. So Mark is going to help share my slides for me. So just be patient with us. Might be a little bit off with going through the slides, but
be understanding with our timing, right?
Yes. All right, Mark, let's see. So as Mark said, my name is Kristen Bodenheimer. I am a board certified behavior analyst and I work at Sasko River Center. So we can go to the next slide. This was just a quick summary of the topic for today. So I'm sure, as we all know, everyone experiences stress and anxiety throughout our lives. But the way that we interpret it, the way that we respond to it is different for everyone. The situations that evoke our stress and anxiety are different for everyone. So I will talk about how anxiety-related thoughts impact behavior and what the functions are. And then at the end, I'll go through what the field of ABA has to offer about some strategies that we can utilize. Okay. Kind of went through this already, but we'll talk about some key terms. I want to just give a little background of applied behavior analysis, maybe for those who don't have a good background of it. I will define stress and anxiety through a behavior analytic lens, and I'm going to talk about how anxiety can impact our behavior. And then at the very end, we will really talk about some strategies that we can apply to our everyday life. Okay, just a little bit about me. As I said, I am a board certified behavior analyst. I got my bachelor's degree in psychology and human development family studies from UConn. I went on and got my master's degree in applied behavior analysis with an emphasis in autism from Ball State University. Been in the field, which is crazy for me to say, but it's been over 9.5 years, probably closer to 10 or more. I've had internships. I became a registered behavior technician in 2014. And then after I got my master's degree, I sat for my certification exam and I became certified in 2018. In both of those roles, I've worked in private ABA companies, and I've also worked in public school settings. So I've worked with a wide range of clients, anywhere from 3 to 20 years old. I've worked with their families, I've worked with their caregivers, other important people in their lives, and I've worked with individuals with a variety of diagnoses, strengths, and needs. I'm very passionate about increasing my clients' independence and self-advocacy through educating them. And I really value collaborating with other professionals, with my clients, and then with other important individuals in their lives to give them more of that comprehensive overall treatment plan. Okay, next slide. Thank you. Just a little background, like I said, in applied behavior analysis, we really like to target those socially significant behaviors. So those behaviors that will have a big impact on everyday life and day-to-day functioning. We focus on defining behaviors in terms that are observable and measurable. So we like to be objective in what we're targeting. We look to the environment to help us understand why the behavior is occurring. What is the function of the behavior? And it helps us then identify replacement behaviors. What skills might be lacking, what needs to be strengthened. And we are a very data-driven field. We like to collect and analyze a lot of data. This helps us develop interventions and also helps us assess the success of the intervention. And finally, the biggest key of all is that behavior is communication. So that means whatever the behavior is, it is serving some purpose, it is functional, and there's a reason that the individual is engaging in that behavior. All right, next, please. Thank you. So the ABCs of applied behavior analysis. This is one of the ways that we analyze our environment. So the A in the ABCs is the antecedent. That is what's happening right before the behavior occurs. So what is that signal? What is that trigger that tells the individual this is a good time to engage in that behavior? B is behavior. And then C is the consequence. It's happening right after the behavior, immediately after. And it's what the client gets from the environment. So it either reinforces the behavior or it punishes the behavior. So this is kind of like a very basic version of how we view behavior and how behaviors are learned. So we have this ABCs of ABA. All right, next, please. I just want to go one little step further. I don't want to go too much into this, but feel free if there are questions, maybe at the end I can go more into this because it can get a little tricky. But the most important thing about consequences, I think that a lot of people think consequence, it's something bad that happens after a behavior. It's something in response to that behavior that's bad. Well, that's not true, at least in the lens of ABA. Consequences can be reinforcement or they can be punishment. So a reinforcement will always, always, always increase the future likelihood that the behavior will occur again. It makes the environment more preferred and more positive. A punishment, on the other hand, always decreases the future likelihood that the behavior will occur again. So the environment aversive and less preferred. A nice little quick, easy example is that it's the week of my test. So that's my antecedent. That's telling me, Kristen, it's a good time to start studying. So I do. That's my behavior. I study really hard for my tests. And therefore, my consequence is that I get a good grade on my test. So I'm reinforced. It makes my environment better. And then in the future, I'm going to study hard again. So my behavior of studying is going to be increased because I got that good grade. And then the same example for punishment, again, could be, all right, it's the week of my test, maybe it's the night before my test, and it should be telling me that it's a good time to study, but instead I decide I'm going to play video games and I'm not going to study at all. So that was my behavior of playing video games. My consequence was that it was punished. That behavior was punished because I failed my test. That is something that is negative, it's aversive, and now in the future, I'm not going to play video games the night before my test, I'm going to study. So it decreased that future likelihood of me playing my video games. And there's been a lot of research that reinforcement is more effective than punishment. And if punishment is used, it should always, always be paired with the reinforcement. There is a lot more that I could talk about with consequences. I'm not going to do that here today because I think it'll go too far, but just one quick note to make is that just remember that reinforcement will always increase the behavior. And one step further is that there's a positive punishment or sorry, there's positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. There is also this for punishment too, but for the purposes of this conversation, a positive punishment, oh my gosh, I meant to say positive reinforcement. That will, I just saw there was a question. Okay, Viviana, I will get there in 1 second, actually, thank you. So a positive reinforcement means that something positive was added to the environment. So I did something good and my mom rewarded me with my money for my chores. So I got money, that was something positive that was added. Negative reinforcement, which is really important for this conversation, is that there was something aversive in my environment, something uncomfortable, something I did not like, and then I engaged in a behavior, and that behavior resulted in me avoiding or escaping the uncomfortable situation. So it made my environment better anyway. So it'll make more sense as I talk more, but just remember that reinforcement, no matter if I say positive or negative, reinforcement will always increase behavior. And then for the question that I see in the chat here, it says, what do you mean by if punishment is used, it should be paired with reinforcement? That just means that if you're going to, if there is a punishment procedure in place and it's being used to decrease the likelihood of maybe a challenging behavior, that there's also a reinforcement system in place for a more appropriate alternative behavior. I do talk about this in my future slides, so I think it'll make more sense. But what it also means is that they just happen simultaneously, and that there's not just a focus on the punishment to reduce that challenging behavior, because if you want to fully reduce or decrease, eliminate a challenging behavior, you need to be able to give the individual something else to engage in place of that. There needs to be another behavior that has the same function that helps them get their needs met. So I mean it more as simultaneously. You're reducing one behavior with a punishment procedure, and then you're also reinforcing a more appropriate behavior at the same time. I hope that helps a little bit. And then, like I said, I think you'll see it a little bit more as I'm talking through the rest of the slides. So again, reinforcement always increases the behavior. Punishment always decreases. So, Mark, we can move on to the next slide, please. All right. So I talk about when I talked about the ABCs of ABA, what we're doing is we're looking for the function of the behavior, the purpose of the behavior. Why is it occurring? And you might say, well, why do we need to know the function? Well, that helps us create more effective treatments. That helps us develop more effective strategies. Because when we know the function, we understand why it's happening, we know what's reinforcing it. So then we're able to look to the environment and change the variables that are increasing those challenging behaviors. So we want to be able to reduce that. We want to reduce the reinforcement for those challenging behaviors. And then we also want to be able to change the environment so that we can increase and teach those appropriate alternative behaviors. So make it a more supportive environment. So really, knowing the function and just really understanding how the environment impacts the behavior will help us create more effective treatments and make it more successful. And so this was kind of what I was talking about previously, is that you always want to have an alternative behavior. And what that means is that if there is a challenging behavior that you're trying to get rid of, you need to be able to teach someone a new behavior to engage in, because they need to be able to have something to do in its place. And so there's, as you can see on the side here, there's five main functions that we talk about in ABA. And those are there's medical, like is there a medical reason for someone engaging in a behavior? As you can see, I underlined this one, escape and avoidance. So we will be talking about this one with anxiety. There's attention, so gaining attention, social praise from others in your environment. There might be a function to gain something tangible, something, a toy, a special snack, special activity, and then sensory and automatic. Just the actual engagement in the behavior is reinforcing. So again, the most important one for today's discussion is the escape and avoidance. So the removal of something uncomfortable is the function of the behavior. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, just a little background, just a little definition I thought would be helpful. So from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, DSM-5, anxiety is the excessive worry and apprehensive expectations. It occurs more days than not for at least 6 months. And it's about a number of activities or events. And it really impacts a wide range of your daily functioning and a lot of events in your own life. Some other symptoms that the DSM-5 talks about is feeling restlessness, easily fatigued, difficulty concentrating, irritability, muscle tension, and sleep disturbance. So these symptoms happening more days than not over 6 months. And then stress from the American Psychological Association is it's a normal reaction to, everyday pressures. Everyone experiences it. And along with anxiety, everyone experiences that too. But stress can be unhealthy when it upsets your day-to-day functioning. So when it impacts your every system of your body, and you can lead to psychological, physiological disorders. And one important note that I talked about in the very beginning about ABA is that we focus on those socially significant behaviors, the behaviors that have a high impact on your daily functioning and across several systems of your life. So by definition, from these two, anxiety and stress are topics that we should be studying in ABA and that we should come up with treatments for, because they do impact your everyday life or can impact your everyday life. So they are socially significant. Okay, next slide, please. Great. And now how we view it in ABA. So historically, which is pretty interesting, as I said in the beginning, we really focus on those observable behaviors, things that we can measure, things that we can define. So thoughts, feelings, emotions, anxiety, stress, those are all things that aren't very observable. So they're more labeled as these private events. So historically, ABA kind of avoided really diving in too deep with this. But recently, which is amazing, and recently it's been years, but compared to other fields, this has been a more recent shift in that ABA is accepting the study of thoughts and emotions and feelings, because as I said, those are socially significant behaviors. They have a big impact on daily functioning and quality of life. So it's really great that we have seen this shift. But again, it's relatively new compared to other fields like psychology that has been always focusing on these topics. And something really I think is really cool about ABA is that we really focus on analyzing the environment. We look for the function, we look for what is the cause. Some other fields might describe it in more of a cyclical manner. So they might say, the individual is anxious because they have anxiety. So it's really not an explanation. And in ABA, we really look for that explanation so that we can develop more appropriate behaviors in place of that while really targeting that same function. So the shift came, and researchers and all of those in the field of ABA said, okay, thoughts and feelings, those are private events, but they are verbal behavior, they're language. And what we know is that language is learned just like any other behavior. And we can follow that same 3-term contingency. Definitely, language is definitely a more complex behavior, and we can definitely see that with anxiety. It's very complex system, but we know that we can still learn about it and treat it like another behavior. And okay, next slide. So as I said, another slide, we're really going to focus on this idea that anxiety-related behaviors function to escape or avoid the aversive situation that evokes these uncomfortable thoughts and feelings. So I'm going to break it down a little bit more. And what we have is that we have that antecedent, that event that's happening right before the behavior. So what is the aversive situation that's creating all these uncomfortable thoughts and feelings in our mind? What is that situation that leads to these feelings? And then, so not only does the situation itself become aversive, but then having these uncomfortable thoughts and feelings also become aversive, and we want to get rid of them. So the behavior is anything that leads to escaping or avoiding all of those things. We want to get rid of those bad feelings, those bad thoughts. And then the consequence is actually being able to escape, delay, or avoid that situation, or being able to temporarily, forget about or not think about those uncomfortable thoughts and feelings. So for example, maybe giving presentations make me feel anxious because maybe one time in my life I had a presentation that I messed up on a word and everyone laughed at me. So I was really embarrassed. So then the next time I had a presentation, I was thinking about how uncomfortable it made me feel. I was nervous that something was going to happen again. And I got so nervous and had all these uncomfortable thoughts and feelings that I felt sick. So then I told my parents I was sick. And they said, okay, fine, you don't have to go to school. And then I was able to miss my presentation, which then reinforced my behavior of being sick during a presentation. So I avoided doing the presentation. Now, maybe in my future, every time I have a presentation, I say I'm sick, and then I don't have to go. And I always avoid those presentations because I've learned when I say I'm sick, I don't have to go do this uncomfortable thing. And I get rid of that uncomfortable situation. I don't have to think about it anymore. And it works for me. Now that is a really clear, simple example of how maybe an anxiety develops. That was a direct experience that I had maybe, but you can also learn these behaviors through observation. So maybe you see your parents or your siblings responding to certain situations in a way that they're having anxious thoughts and feelings and they avoid it themselves and they have these big intense reactions. So then maybe you're learning that because you see it happening. So that's a more indirect way of learning about it. Sometimes you have an experience and you generalize you generalize that feeling and those behaviors to a similar situation. So maybe it isn't that I had a really horrible experience during a presentation. Maybe I get nervous that someone's going to judge me. And then, so every situation that has that social probability of someone judging me, I get nervous and I try to avoid that uncomfortable feeling. So again, there's different ways that we might learn about these things, but the most important point for this slide is that the anxiety-related behaviors that we are observing are functioning to escape, avoid, or delay having those uncomfortable feelings and then having to engage in that situation. Sometimes our learning isn't perfect. As I said, it might be an observation, it might be generalized, and it could actually be like an accidental learning where it's not really true, like it shouldn't have happened, but it was such a powerful situation that it continued. I can give more examples about that, but one thing to think about is that like superstitious behaviors are kind of like that accidental learning. And then you develop these rules about it that aren't true and they're rigid and they're not really helpful, but it was such a powerful situation for you that it created these learned behaviors. Okay, I think I'm ready to move on. Thank you, Mark. All right, so as I said, behavior is communication. So it is always serving a purpose. It's always serving a function. Some examples of avoidant behaviors because of anxiety might be procrastination. So temporarily avoiding having to deal with those uncomfortable thoughts and feelings, having to prepare for something that is uncomfortable for you. You might see that someone's engaging in non-compliance or refusal behavior. So just doing anything else, not following the directions and avoiding engaging in those behaviors. Sometimes, as I was saying in the definition about anxiety, it could lead to physical symptoms. You might actually truly feel sick. And so that could be another avoidant behavior. Some people might literally, especially I think about younger kids in this, might literally run away or hide, physically get away from a situation. And then sometimes it does increase to more intense behaviors. We might see kids engaging in tantrum-like behaviors. There could be aggression, there could be property destruction. But the most important thing to remember is that there's a reason that they're engaging in these behaviors. And these more intense behaviors might be more common in younger children or those who have a lack of appropriate communication skills to express themselves. So if they don't have the ability or don't have the language to say, I'm feeling uncomfortable, I need a break, I need this, they're likely going to engage in these more intense behaviors because it results in an escape from the situation. And, it it's not that, I'm not saying that is bad. I know that sometimes it's really hard when a child is screaming and crying or they're being aggressive. As a parent, you don't want to obviously push them into something that's going to make them feel this way. And sometimes there's a million other things going on, and it's easier to just say, okay, you don't have to do it right now. We'll try it another time. But that's reinforcing the behavior. That's helping them get out of what they're avoiding. So, like I said, it might escalate to more intense behaviors, but they're just trying to express that they're uncomfortable and they don't know, they may not have the skills to regulate themselves, to express themselves appropriately. I said this in the other slide, but sometimes our behaviors become rule governed, and sometimes those rules are rigid and unhelpful. So therefore your behaviors become rigid and unhelpful. So you might say, you might think, I'm not good at this. I'm always going to fail because I'm not good at this. And when I fail, I will be embarrassed. Everyone is going to make fun of me. So I'm just not going to try. And that could be a rigid rule that you have. And then your behavior becomes rigid because you're basing it off of that. Mark, let me see. Sorry, I can see that we have a couple questions here.
Yeah, I was just about to let you know. I don't know if you want to hold off on answering those or if you want to address those.
So Alexa, I will talk about maybe doing some treatments in conjunction at the very end. So I'll do that. Okay, so why don't I say both of these for a little bit more of a discussion at the end, if you don't mind.
Sounds good. They'll obviously be in the chat box, so we can refer to those when it's question and answer time if appropriate.
Sounds great. Thank you. Okay, and I think I covered everything on this slide that I needed to, so we can go on to the next slide, please. All right, and now for managing the anxiety. So I gave a background of kind of the ABA in general. I gave some information about how we view it in ABA. So we view anxiety-related behaviors as an escape from those uncomfortable thoughts and feelings. That's the function. Now, obviously, anxiety and stress is different for everyone. So some of the strategies that I'm going to suggest today may not work, or they may not, all of them may not work for everyone. So it's really, you have to try it out, and you have to remember that it's different, it's individualized for everyone. These are obviously more generalized strategies and not specific to any one in particular. So, remember that if there is a need for more intensive treatment planning, you want to consult and work with professionals that have a little bit more of this training and understanding and can help you develop more intensive treatment planning. Behavior takes time to change. There's likely a long learning history of these behaviors, of what created them and maintained them, and there might be rules and relationships that have developed over a long time. So that means it's likely that to undo those rules and relationships and behaviors is going to take a lot of time. And then to develop new skills on top of that. So it's always important, and it can be hard to remember in the moment that it takes time. And there will be bumps, and bumps along the way are normal and natural, and it's going to happen. But if you are consistent and you really focus on that ultimate goal, the change will happen over time. And, especially if you're working with, if your child is younger, or even with yourself, you have a long learning history of these behaviors, you're going to need a lot of guidance and support in the beginning, because it's going to be hard, especially learning new skills and trying them out in these uncomfortable situations. It's hard. So remember that your child is going to need your guidance and going to need your support a lot early on. So like I said, these are general strategies, but they're ones that you could try in your everyday life and see, what works for you, what works for your children. I always like to say, have fun with it. Try to get the whole family on board, because the more people that are involved, that means there's going to be more practice. There's more modeling and reinforcing. It's more motivating to try these things all together. And then it's likely more effective when you have everyone involved there. Okay, we can go on. So the overall goal in managing anxiety is, as I kind of, when I talked earlier in the beginning, the main thing that you want to do is you want to help reduce these challenging behaviors, these avoidant behaviors that are, maybe getting in the way of daily functioning. They have a really big impact on, someone's quality of life. So you want to work on reducing those. And you want to try to do that through decreasing the intensity of those aversive thoughts and feelings about a situation. So those big overwhelming feelings and thoughts You want to work on trying to decrease those, decrease the intensity and overwhelmingness of those. And then simultaneously, you want to increase those socially appropriate behaviors. You need to give them something else to do in place. You can't just say, all right, we're going to stop being anxious about this. You're going to stop having tantrums every time that you have to go try something new, and then not give them something else to do, because they don't have a way then to have their needs met and to express how they're feeling. And so you always have to remember to give those appropriate replacement behaviors. And that way, in combination of reducing the intensity of those thoughts and feelings, giving them other behaviors and skills that they can do in place, you will work on gradually tolerating being in those aversive situations. So you really give them the skills to make them, confident to be able to do that. When you choose these replacement behaviors, these, more appropriate coping behaviors, you're going to teach, you're going to practice, you're going to reinforce, because you have to really, these other behaviors, these avoidant behaviors that are challenging, they're working for them right now. They've been successful. So you really have to focus on practicing those other behaviors and reinforcing them a lot, so that your child or the individual really has the ability to use them in the situation when they need to. So as I said, they're in conjunction with these other strategies, you will work on gradually, very gradually, exposing someone to the uncomfortable situation, that anxiety provoking situation. You're going to do it, you can't expect someone to just go right into an anxiety provoking situation and just say, okay, go ahead, do these new skills that we practiced and you're going to be fine. You have to do it gradually. You have to do baby steps. You have to build upon each other. So you're going to make it modified at first. And I go through a little bit of an example, a very simple example later on, but there's these broken down, you want to make it broken down steps, and you're going to build on them. And when you do it that way, you're letting that individual to have more success in little small increments. And they're contacting reinforcement when they're in the aversive situation and nothing bad is happening. And so they're building up on those, and they're getting more confident in their skills and more confidence. And so they're able to build on, and then you gradually expose them to more and more of the uncomfortable situation, and they're more and more successful in doing it. And a really important thing, but also a very hard thing to do, is to not reinforce those avoidant behaviors, especially if you have a child who is engaging in more intense behaviors like tantruming, aggression. As someone had said in the comment, they're hitting their siblings. It's hard to not say, okay, fine, you don't have to go do that, just stop doing that behavior. But when you do that, you're reinforcing it. So you really want to not have them engage. You really don't want to reinforce those behaviors and let them get out of the anxiety provoking situation, because that's just continuing to make those challenging behaviors successful. So you really want to not reinforce them. And you're going to do that by encouraging them to take those small baby steps to go into the aversive situation and try out those new skills in that anxiety situation, rather than letting them escape it all the time. And it's important to, with these little gradual baby steps that you're having them do, you want to always reinforce and highlight those little mini successes. So even if it's 5 minutes that they sat in a situation that previously made them really anxious, you have a big celebration for that, and you reinforce it, and you show them how well they did, and you make it a really big celebration, because those are the little steps that you're going to build upon each other. And then another thing too is that, especially with younger kids, you might see that they don't have a really clear understanding of their own feelings and emotions. That's normal for younger kids. So you might have to take a step back and really focus on, okay, let's increase their understanding of their own emotions. And you might have to do some explicit labeling and training for them. Things as simple as, when they're crying, you can say, wow, I see that you're crying. You must be really sad about this. Or, whoa, I can hear you screaming. You must be really, really mad about this situation. So just even those kinds of comments to help them become more aware of their own emotions and feelings, and help them label them a little better, so that they are able to talk to you about it, and that they are able to use their words instead to express it, because the earlier that they're able to use their words to express how they're feeling, then the more likely you're able to intervene and help them and guide them through different behaviors. And then they don't have to escalate to those more intense, challenging avoidant behaviors. Okay, next slide. Okay, so some more of those strategies, as I said, we really want to try to reduce those avoidant behaviors by neutralizing or making those negative thoughts a little less overwhelming, a little less controlling of the behavior. And then simultaneously, you're going to be teaching those replacement behaviors. So what I mean by neutralizing those negative thoughts and feelings is that you want to just try to weaken their relationship, give them less control and power, remind them that those thoughts and feelings maybe don't always tell you the truth, right? You are might be telling yourself that you're really bad at something, but that's not true. You might be able to look back at successful situations and say, hey, you were able to do that other time, remember? So your uncomfortable thought that you're having about yourself and about this situation isn't true. And it's going to go away. They're temporary. They're not going to last forever. So even though you're going to try to help them weaken these thoughts, you always want to validate, support, and empower the way that a child is feeling, and anyone doesn't, this isn't just for children, but you really want to validate how they're feeling, because what they're feeling is actually there. So you don't want to tell them, you don't want to invalidate that and make it like it's no big deal. They're really having these big thoughts and behavior or of feelings. And so you want to say things such as, I know that you're really scared. I know that you're uncomfortable. Everyone feels this way. It's okay. And I also know that you can do this. Nothing bad is going to happen to you. You're a really great friend and you're going to go through this activity and you're going to have a great time. Or you're a really hardworking student and you're going to get through this because I know that you can do it. So giving them those empowering statements where I know you're feeling this way and I know it's a real feeling. And I also know that you can do it. So help support them that way too. As I said, you can point out how they were successful in other situations, because it's likely that what they're thinking about themselves, what they're thinking about the situation is not always fully true. So remember that other time that you were able to go to that new sport and you did really, really well and you had so much fun. Well, that's going to happen again this time. And just along those same lines, you want to just focus on the facts of the situation, because anxiety is really the fear of what could happen. It's the fear of what might occur, not what is going to occur. So really focusing on the facts of the situation and pointing out how they have been successful and how they have done it before, and that the thoughts and feelings aren't true. They might go away, or they will go away. They're temporary. And then some of the other replacement behaviors now. So you've worked on trying to help neutralize and give those thoughts and feelings less weight. And now you're going to focus on, well, what are some replacement behaviors that they can do instead? Because they need a way to help them get rid of these uncomfortable thoughts and feelings. So some replacement behaviors are being able to redirect the attention away from the negative thoughts, feelings, rules, and engage in more appropriate behaviors. There are a ton of strategies that can be used here. I've given a couple that I really like, but one of the most important ones, and I've talked about this with teaching children about how to identify the way that they're feeling and express it, but teaching your child to use their words appropriately is probably one of the biggest replacement behaviors that you can teach them. Because when they're able to express themselves and they're able to say, I'm really uncomfortable, I need a break, or I need to do this instead, I need help, and then it's successful and you do give them a break, you do help them through something challenging, well, that's successful. And then they don't have to go and engage in these more challenging behaviors. So really giving them that language, giving them that ability to advocate for themselves and state how they're feeling and what they might need in that situation is really such a powerful behavior to really focus on. Other strategies to use when you're trying to help give them something else to do when they're feeling these uncomfortable thoughts is mindfulness. Being more present in the moment, present moment awareness will literally help you focus on what is happening and not what you're thinking about might happen or what has happened in the past. So when you're more present, you're not giving as much attention to these thoughts. So there's so many mindfulness activities that you can do a Google search and try out with your kids and with your family. And some of them are really fun. And, there's a lot of breathing techniques out there too that I really love even to use for myself. And using even things like humor. I also really like using humor with especially younger kids. When you're laughing about a situation, it's way less overwhelming. So making it more fun and bringing in that humor could be a good way to help just lessen that weight that those uncomfortable thoughts and feelings are giving you. And then, as I said, again, using your words is so powerful, and sometimes it's really appropriate to ask for a temporary avoidance, to ask for a break away from the situation, because sometimes all that we need is to step away for a second, give ourselves something else to focus on, and then kind of reset. And then we can go back when we're feeling a little bit calmer. So, maybe some breaks could include reading a favorite book, listening to music, coloring, exercising. All of those are ways to give yourself more of an appropriate temporary escape before getting back into that more aversive situation. And like I said, there's so many, and I probably could have 10 slides on all the different strategies and mindfulness that you can use, but make it fun and try out different ones and see what works for you and your family and your children. And so there's so many different ones out there just to do even a simple Google search. But I do at the very end of my presentation have some of my favorites that I like to use. But okay, so we can go on to the next one. So now that you have, helped your child work through some of those uncomfortable thoughts and feelings, and try to really teach them that they're temporary, they're going to go away, and that they don't always mean the truth. And you give them these other replacement behaviors of using their words to express how they're feeling, asking for breaks, asking for other things that they might need to help them through that situation. You also want to set their environment up for success. So, like I said before, anxiety is the fear of what might happen, of what could happen, and that's unpredictable. So increase the predictability, reduce the unknown. So you're going to want to prepare and prime your child for some of these aversive, anxiety-provoking situations. So creating schedules, creating routines, having that structure in place is helpful. Creating plans and setting realistic goals to gradually expose yourself to these uncomfortable situations, really important. And sticking to those plans, keeping it consistent, keeping it routine is really helpful. You're going to want to practice all of this while in a time when they're not in that anxiety-provoking situation. So you want to practice it when they're comfortable, when they're relaxed, when they can easily engage with you. And you can make it fun, you can make it a role play and be silly, but have them practice and practice and practice so that it becomes kind of like a habit, so that when they're in a situation that they're having all these big feelings and thoughts, that it's easier for them to be able to use the strategies that you've talked about with them. And of course, you always want to reinforce. Reinforce is so important. You want to make sure that their new skills are successful for them, and that they and sorry, I saw the question in there. So you want to make sure that they know that what they're doing is successful, and you really want to reward them for trying out being in the situation and using these different strategies. So reinforcing it is really, really key. And you can do things as simple as being very specific when you give them praise. So, wow, I'm so proud of you for trying that strategy. Like, you look so much calmer to me, and you were able to try out that situation. So you might be really specific in your praise with them. You might also have to give them a little bit more of external reinforcement. So maybe it's okay, we're going to go try this out and this situation out. And when you are, sorry.
All right.
That's okay. There we are. Okay. So you might have to do something a little bit more external. Obviously, in the end, it will just be reinforcing that they're able to go through these situations without having such an intense reaction. But in the beginning, they might need a little bit more additional reinforcement. So maybe it's like, okay, we're going to try to go to this new activity for 5 minutes. And then when you're done, we're going to go have an ice cream party, and we're going to celebrate how awesome you did and how great it was. So you really want to focus on reinforcing. That's also such a fun thing to do with your children, and really give them the opportunity to say, what they're really looking forward to, what they really they want to have as their reinforcement at the end. Another really helpful tool is giving them prompts and other visuals that might help them in the process. So as I said, you're going to probably have to give your children a lot of support and coaching through these new skills and these difficult situations. You always want to, like I said, you're going to validate, you're going to support them, you're going to empower them, you're going to practice with them, you're going to model appropriate responding to these situations, and you're going to be there for them. So they might need a lot of support in the beginning. Other useful strategies are maybe something like using a timer. So you might say, okay, you only have to stay for 10 minutes. We're going to set the timer for 10 minutes, or you only have to do this for 10 minutes. We're going to set the timer. You can set the timer. And then when the timer goes off, that means you're all done. Or maybe it's to help them, remind them that they can engage in a strategy. Using pictures to say, okay, remember, these are all the different things that we talked about. These are all the things that you can do when you're feeling uncomfortable. So giving them those other supports is really helpful too when you're preparing for it and you're giving them all of that predictability. And all of these skills are just really useful because they increase an individual's independence, their control, their autonomy, responsibility, all of those things. So you get some secondary benefits of that. And when you're talking about these situations, you want to be very clear and very concise as to just the facts. This is what you're going to go do. This is where you'll be. This is how long you have to be there. Here are some strategies that you can do when you're there. And then also focus on why they're doing it. Why do they even have to go through this uncomfortable situation? What is the purpose? And give them, kind of a little bit more motivation. You are going to try out this new sport because you're actually really good at sports and you love meeting new people. You're a great friend. This is how we're going to make new friends and play a really fun sport. And give them kind of that other motivation, that's something to look forward to and why they should even try to do this, because otherwise they're not going to really care about trying to deal with this uncomfortable feeling. But when you can give them those larger goals, larger reinforcement, it is more motivating. Okay, and then when you're creating the plan and you are setting those realistic goals, again, that is breaking it down maybe into really small steps, things that are doable and manageable. Again, you're not going to say, all right, I know that I'll use sports again, that maybe going to this sport practice is really stressful for you. So maybe it's not that they have to go for the whole time. Maybe you break it down and say you only have to go for a couple minutes and then slowly work up to it. So you want to build on it. You want to make it realistic, because when you do that, then they are more likely to be successful and there is more reinforcement. And when it's in smaller doses, it's way less overwhelming, so that they are able to do it and get through it without having all of those super intense feelings and thoughts. Okay, next. All right, I just wanted to, because as Mark said, I know that I've been giving a lot of information and I'm trying to connect it all together, but I thought maybe giving a really simple, easy example right here might be a good way to kind of tie it in for everyone. So I've talked about reducing those thoughts and feelings and that uncomfortable feelings. And then I also talked about creating new skills and using those skills in place of those challenging behaviors. And I've talked about gradually exposing them to the situation. So putting that all together, you want to help them gradually learn to tolerate the situation. So I was just saying that when you slowly increase the amount of time that the individual is expected to remain in a situation, then that leads to more success. That's a little bit easier than saying you have to go for an hour and a half versus you just have to try this for 5 minutes. That is way less overwhelming and way, way, way more realistic and doable. So slowly building up the tolerance. And then you want to create plans with them. You want to create a goal, and if you can, and I highly recommend having them be a part of it, have them help plan this out. What are they comfortable with? So it might be, you're just going to go there for 5 minutes. You're just going to try this situation out for 5 minutes and you only have to watch. You don't have to do anything else. You could sit on the sides and watch. Then the next time they, after they do that and they feel good about it, okay, then the next time you're going to do it for 10 minutes. And then the next time you're going to join the group, and then you're going to build up the time, and maybe you're going to participate, and then finally get to the point where they're able to stay for the whole time and participate. And also something, important to remember is that it might not ever become a really reinforcing situation. It might not be something that they really love, but the goal maybe is just that they get to a point where it's okay and it's fine enough that they're able to go there, they can do it, and they can participate for as long as they need to. And then also having those new skills and tools in their toolbox to help them when they are starting to feel uncomfortable, that'll help make it more successful. So when you're creating the plan, you're also talking about, okay, what are you going to do when you start feeling uncomfortable? Remember, these are the things that we talked about. You can use your words to ask for a break. You can use your words to talk about how you're feeling. Remember that you really like this breathing technique. Let's try it together. Remember, you can do this. And just giving them those reminders that your feelings will go away, that these thoughts and feelings are temporary and the situation is temporary. It's all going to go away, and it's all, it's not forever. And so using things like visuals and timers and things like that can also help make it a little bit more predictable for a child. So when you're creating these plans with them and you're prepping for it, you're going to always want to remember to practice a lot and reinforce it in a situation when they're comfortable. So you're going to do it when they're nowhere near the uncomfortable situation. And then right before they're about to go engage in that uncomfortable, aversive situation, anxiety provoking situation, you want to review everything with them. Remember, prepare and prime them for it and get them ready for it. Give them the plan so that they feel confident and they remember what they can do. And then again, really important, right after, you want to celebrate it, you want to reinforce it, and you want to show them that they were successful, they did it. So having that celebration after is just as important as preparing them for it. All right, and we can go on. We are almost done. I promise. I know I'm talking a lot. So just some final thoughts. This is kind of for parents, particularly. Caregiver burnout is a real thing. So when you're burnt out and you're not able to fully take care of yourself, you may not be able to fully support your child. So taking time for your own mental and physical health is hugely important, and it's not selfish at all. You need to have that so that you can support your children more effectively. Because if not, unfortunately, it can become a vicious cycle. If you're experiencing a lot of stress and anxiety, and maybe you're responding ineffectively, well, then your children are going to see that, and maybe they're responding now ineffectively too, which then will likely increase your stress and anxiety. So it could be a vicious cycle, and it can go on. So, even though I talked about it as they might be observing unhealthy or unhelpful coping behaviors, the alternative can happen. You can also model appropriate behaviors and model those appropriate coping strategies for your kids. Okay. And then just one more thought on some fun family things with stress and anxiety. When you are more stressed and anxious, that usually means that you're engaging less in behaviors that are leading to reinforcement. So you might be focusing on all of those stressful and anxious situations rather than creating time that is reinforcing and that is enjoyable for your family. So setting up your environment for success, make the time to schedule in those fun activities, things that really bring out the joy and the good times, because then you have something to also look forward to. So those overwhelming, stressful situations may not be as potent if you have something else to also have that positive reinforcement. And you can do things that are fun, with the whole family. You can do behavior contracts, family charters. That really just kind of means that you make a contract for the whole family to sign. Maybe there's some personal or family goals and values that you guys talk about, and everyone says how they're going to, respond to when they're feeling anxious, how they're going to support each other, or maybe it's how you're going to increase the fun times, and then you sign it and you make it more of a official document. So there's fun things that you can do just for the whole family and get everyone involved. And just, focusing on having those positive things in your environment will also help. Okay, we are just about there. I'm not going to go into this because this could be a whole other presentation, but there is something acceptance and commitment therapy or acceptance and commitment training. It's really an interesting topic. I have done some research on my own. I've done some courses. I will be doing another big course, but I'm in no way an expert in this at all. I just think it's really beneficial, and I really like the strategies. A lot of the strategies I talked about also came from acceptance and commitment therapy strategies. So I just wanted to kind of throw this in there as maybe something for further exploration. I have some other resources that you can look at. It's just a really, really beneficial and really easily applicable strategies from this. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to throw that in there just to give a little bit more. And I think someone had asked about using other therapy in conjunction. As I said, I really value collaboration. I love applied behavior analysis. I think it's amazing, but that doesn't always mean it's going to work for everyone, and that's okay. And I also think that working with other professionals can give a more comprehensive treatment. So sure, if there is another type of therapy that you think can work in conjunction with ABA, like I definitely think it's great. I think that you can use other things in conjunction with some of these strategies. So I agree, and that if there is a need for another therapy, could absolutely do them together. And this is my final slide. So to summarize it all, we have learned a lot today. What I've talked about is that behaviors are learned, and that is true for the thoughts and feelings and that we're having about certain situations. And then it's also true about the behaviors that we're engaging in to get rid of those thoughts and feelings. When we understand the whole context and the function of the behavior, we're able to better change the environment to reduce those challenging thought behaviors, those challenging situations. And then we're able to select, teach, and reinforce those more appropriate behaviors that have the same kind of function and that help the individual have their needs met. And then finally, when an individual is better prepared and they have those alternative skills in their toolbox, they can learn to gradually tolerate those aversive situations without leading to more intense reactions. So that better quality of life. So we are finally done, and I hope that this was helpful. So we have a lot of time, or I don't know how much time actually, Mark, how much time do we have left?
Well, we're past 11, but I have time, perhaps you have time, and I can certainly stay on. We can open to anyone who wants to hang out and ask some more questions if you have the moment, if you have the time.
I do. And again, I know that I gave a lot of information here. So also feel free, if you have to leave, please feel free to just email me any of those. If you have any like general questions about what I talked about in my presentation, please feel free to email me. You can tell I like to talk about this stuff, so I have no problem answering some emails about the topics that I want to today.
I guess people are signing off here, but in just I guess if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them out loud at this point. But one point of clarification, Kristen, and I think it's from an earlier slide, but when you talk about reinforcement versus punishment, and that's a I mean, that's specific to the person receiving it, right? I mean, because some things that we might consider to be punishment are actually reinforcement, right? So, failing a test was the example on your slide, but maybe, I mean, maybe as a kid, maybe I failed some tests on purpose,
Right.
just.
Yes, exactly. It is all very individualized. And I think that's also something that is so important. Leaving, when you leave this presentation, to think about that, I tried to give as general strategies, but all of this is so individualized for everyone. So what I think is reinforcing is going to be different for someone else. What I think is aversive and anxiety provoking for me, you might love it and you might think that's reinforcing. So it is really individualized. And I think that it's important to just keep that in mind too, that some of these you might say like, Kristen, that's not going to work, and that's okay. Like, it might not work, but there's other strategies out there that you kind of have to be creative, and you have to think about maybe just the core of what I've talked about, and then be creative and figuring out what works for you, what works for your family, what works for your child. Really a whole system approach,
Perfect.
but I think that it's definitely individualized.
All right. Any questions from the audience? You can unmute yourself, or there's a couple questions in the text or in the chat.
I have a question. This is Jennifer Dorrington. I was just wondering, what if like one of the situations to avoid is unplanned situations? I know that one of your like strategies was to create this plan and make it predictable and make it, slowly getting comfortable with the situation. But for us, one of our issues is when something doesn't go according to plan, when there's something unexpected that happens, being able to deal with that, being able to deal with not knowing, every step of what's going to happen on an event or a day or whatever it is.
And that is, that's very common, because that's that unpredictability, right? And then you have this thought in your head of what's going to happen, and then it doesn't. So one way you can do it is kind of start to schedule in those unpredictable times. So you might literally say, we're going to practice this not going to plan, or we're going to practice having, this, we're going to go off of your plan. So it's not obviously a true unpredictable situation because you're warning them, but you can start to try to incorporate those, it's so weird to say like that, but those planned, unplanned situations. So help them kind of deal with things not going their way. And we're going to do something different today. And you can still prep them beforehand, right? To initially get them used to having to deal with that and to learn to use their strategies when they're starting to get upset. So obviously that's not easy, because there's things that you can't control, but if you can kind of set up a situation and have them practice dealing with changes. I know that sounds kind of weird, because again, you're setting up a situation and you're making it planned, but does that kind of make sense to create those?
There will be something unpredictable. You just don't know what it is.
Right. And you can do it seriously. And then having those situations where you're like, we're going to practice this and it's going to be uncomfortable and we're going to get through it, and do it in baby steps too. So you can still use it in that way. You just have to be a little bit more creative with that. So I hope that was kind of helpful for you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
We can take more questions. I'm just going to stop the recording right now.
Sure.
A little side note, today's my last day at Sasko River, so I wanted to say thank you to everyone and goodbye, and someone else will be handling these in the future, but it's been fun.
I feel honored that I was the last one to have your support.